everyone, and welcome back. I'm so happy you're here with us today. Have you ever felt nervous before visiting a doctor because you weren't sure what to say in English? If your answer is yes, don't worry. You're definitely not alone. Many English learners know the medical words, but they still struggle to have a natural conversation at a clinic. Today, we're going to make that much easier.
That sounds perfect for me, because I always worry about saying the wrong thing. I know simple words like doctor and medicine, but when I actually need to explain how I feel, my mind suddenly goes blank.
That happens to many people, Harry. The good news is that you don't need difficult vocabulary to communicate clearly. Simple, natural sentences are often the best choice. Doctors usually ask straightforward questions, and they appreciate clear answers.
That's a relief. Sometimes I think I need to use very advanced English to sound polite, but then I become even more confused.
Actually, simple English is often the most effective. Imagine you have a fever or a headache. You don't want to spend time searching for complicated words. You just want the doctor to understand you quickly.
That makes a lot of sense. If I have a terrible headache, I probably won't remember fancy vocabulary anyway. I'll just want some help.
Exactly. Let's imagine you've just arrived at a medical clinic. You walk through the front door, take a deep breath, and go to the reception desk. The receptionist smiles and says, "Good morning."
Maybe I would say, "Hello, I want doctor."
You today. What would you say? That's understandable, but here's a more natural way to say it. You could say, "Hello, I'd like to see a doctor, please." The phrase, "I'd like to," sounds polite and is very common in everyday English.
Let me try again. "Hello, I'd like to see a doctor, please." That definitely sounds smoother.
It really does. You can use "I'd like to" in many situations, not just at a clinic. For example, "I'd like to make an appointment," or "I'd like to ask a question."
I like expressions that work in many places. They're much easier to remember.
I agree. Now, imagine the receptionist asks, "Do you have an appointment?" This is a very common question. If you already booked a visit, you can simply say, "Yes, I have an appointment at 10 o'clock."
And if I didn't book one?
Then you can politely answer, "No, I don't. Is it possible to see a doctor today?" That's a respectful and natural question.
I like that expression. Is it possible? It sounds polite without being difficult.
Exactly. Politeness doesn't have to be complicated. Another useful phrase is, "It's an emergency," but only use it if the situation is truly serious.
Hopefully, I never need to say that, but it's good to know.
Absolutely. Here's another question you might hear. "Can you tell me what's wrong?" The doctor or receptionist simply wants to know why you're visiting.
I think I would answer, "I have a sore throat and I've been coughing since yesterday."
That's an excellent answer. It's clear, natural, and gives useful information. You mentioned both the problem and when it started, which helps the doctor understand your situation better.
I used to think I needed long explanations, but short, clear sentences seem much more helpful.
You're catching on quickly. Before we continue, think about this for a moment. If someone at a clinic asked you, "How can I help you today?" what would your answer be? Try saying it aloud. Speaking out loud, even when you're alone.
I like that idea. It feels like real practice, instead of just reading words on a page.
That's exactly our goal. Throughout today's conversation, we'll practice real situations that you can actually use the next time you visit a doctor's clinic. By the end of this episode, you'll feel much more confident speaking English in a medical setting.
I already feel more confident than I did a few minutes ago. Just practicing these simple expressions makes the situation seem much less stressful.
I'm glad to hear that. Confidence often comes from familiarity. The more often you hear and use these expressions, the more naturally they'll come to you when you really need them.
So, after I check in at the reception desk, what usually happens next?
In many clinics, you'll be asked to take a seat and wait for your name to be called. The receptionist might say, "Please have a seat. The doctor will see you shortly."
I know the phrase, have a seat, but what does shortly mean?
Good question. Shortly simply means soon or in a short time. So if someone says, "The doctor will see you shortly," they're telling you that you won't have to wait very long.
That's easy to remember. It's a polite way of saying, please wait a little.
Exactly. While you're waiting, it's common to think about how you'll explain your symptoms. The word symptoms means the signs that show you're not feeling well, like a cough, a fever, or a stomachache.
Sometimes I worry that I'll forget an important detail once I'm sitting in front of the doctor.
That happens more often than you think. One simple tip is to think about 3 things before your appointment: what hurts, when it started, and whether it's getting better or worse.
That's a helpful strategy. Instead of trying to remember everything, I can focus on those 3 questions.
Exactly. Let's imagine the doctor invites you into the examination room and says, "Please come in. What brings you in today?" This question may sound unusual at first, but it's very common.
Does "what brings you in today" simply mean, why are you here today?
That's exactly right. It's a friendly way to ask about the reason for your visit. You don't need a complicated answer. You could simply say, "I've had a fever since last night," or "I've been feeling dizzy for 2 days."
Let me try one. I've had a sore throat for 3 days, and it's getting worse.
That sounds very natural. I especially like that you added, "It's getting worse." That gives the doctor more useful information.
I notice we're using "I've had" quite often. Is that common in everyday English?
Yes, it is. When you're talking about a health problem that started in the past and is still happening now, "I've had" sounds very natural. For example, "I've had a headache all morning," or "I've had a cough for a week."
I think I've heard native speakers use that expression many times, but I never understood why.
Now you know, and you'll probably notice it even more in real conversations. That's one of the best ways to learn English. First you understand it, then you start hearing it everywhere.
That reminds me of something funny. A friend once translated directly from his own language and told the doctor, "My head is paining."
I can imagine that. People may understand what he meant, but a more natural sentence would be, "My head hurts," or "I have a headache."
That's much simpler. Sometimes the easiest sentence is also the most natural one.
You're absolutely right. English doesn't always need to be complicated. Clear communication is much more important than using difficult words.
1. What if the doctor asks me to describe the pain? I think that would be harder.
It can seem difficult at first, but there are some simple words that work well. You can say the pain is sharp, dull, mild, or severe. For example, it's a sharp pain in my back, or it's a mild headache.
I think I understand. Mild means it's not very strong, and severe means it's very strong.
Exactly. Those are useful words because doctors often ask about the intensity of the pain.
I can already imagine having this conversation without feeling so nervous. Instead of worrying about perfect English, I can focus on explaining how I feel clearly.
That's the mindset we want. Remember, the goal isn't to impress the doctor with advanced vocabulary. The goal is to communicate your symptoms accurately so you can receive the right care. As we continue, we'll look at the questions doctors commonly ask and learn how to answer them confidently in everyday English.
I like that approach because it takes away a lot of pressure. I don't have to sound perfect. I just need to explain my problem clearly.
That's exactly the right attitude. Doctors aren't judging your English. They're listening carefully because they want to understand your health concerns. Clear communication is always more important than perfect grammar.
So, what question usually comes after I explain my symptoms?
One very common question is, when did it start? The doctor wants to know when your symptoms first appeared. Your answer can be simple and direct.
I could say, it started yesterday morning.
Perfect. You could also say, it started 3 days ago, or it began last week. Both started and began sound natural in this situation.
That's easier than I expected. I don't need a long explanation.
Exactly. Then the doctor might ask, has it been getting better or worse? They're trying to understand whether your condition is improving or becoming more serious.
I would answer, it's been getting worse since yesterday.
Very natural. If you're feeling better, you could say, it's getting better, but I still have some pain.
I notice that adding a little extra information makes the answer more helpful.
It certainly does. Now, imagine the doctor asks, can you describe the pain? Many learners become nervous because they think they need advanced vocabulary, but that's not necessary.
Besides sharp and mild, what other words can I use?
You can also say constant if the pain never goes away, or on and off if it comes and goes. For example, the pain is constant, or the pain comes and goes throughout the day.
I like the expression comes and goes. It sounds very natural.
It really is. Native speakers use it all the time. You can even say, the headache comes and goes, which tells the doctor that it isn't there all the time.
That's useful because sometimes my allergies are exactly like that. I feel fine for a while, and then the symptoms suddenly come back.
That's a perfect example. Another question you might hear is, have you taken any medicine? The doctor wants to know if you've already tried something to feel better.
Then I could answer, yes, I took some pain medicine this morning, but it didn't help very much.
Excellent answer. If you haven't taken anything, simply say, no, I haven't taken any medicine yet.
I can already see a complete conversation forming. Every question connects naturally to the next one.
That's how real conversations work. You don't have to memorize a long speech. You simply answer one question at a time.
I remember a time when I visited a clinic while traveling. The doctor asked several short questions, but I had prepared one long explanation. I became confused because the conversation didn't go the way I expected.
That's a common experience. Real conversations are flexible. Instead of preparing one long paragraph, it's better to practice answering short questions confidently.
That would definitely make me feel more relaxed.
Here's another useful expression. The doctor may ask, "Are you allergic to any medication?" The word allergic means your body has a bad reaction to something.
If I don't have any allergies, I can simply say, "No, I'm not allergic to any medication."
Exactly. If you do have an allergy, you could say, "Yes, I'm allergic to penicillin," or mention whichever medicine applies to you.
That's important because the doctor needs to know before giving me any medicine.
Absolutely. Sharing that information helps the doctor choose a treatment that's safe for you.
Another question I've heard is, do you have any other symptoms? At first, I wasn't sure what that meant.
It's a very common question. The doctor is asking whether you have any additional problems besides the main one. You might answer, "Yes, I also have a cough," or "No, that's the only symptom."
I like how these conversations build step by step. At the beginning, I thought a medical appointment would require hundreds of difficult words. Now I realize that a small number of useful expressions can help me through most situations.
That's exactly the lesson. With a few practical phrases, clear answers, and a little confidence, you'll be able to communicate much more comfortably. In our next conversation, we'll continue the appointment by discussing the doctor's advice, understanding prescriptions, and asking important follow-up questions before leaving the clinic.
I'm looking forward to learning that part because understanding the doctor's advice seems just as important as explaining my symptoms.
You're absolutely right. Many learners focus only on describing how they feel, but listening carefully is equally important. After examining you, the doctor might say, "I don't think it's anything."
That sentence would make me feel much better immediately. It sounds very reassuring.
It's anything serious. It certainly does. The word serious means something severe or dangerous. So if the doctor says it isn't serious, they're telling you there's probably no major reason to worry.
Okay, that's good to know. But what if the doctor thinks I need some medicine?
Then you might hear, "I'm going to prescribe some medication." The word prescribe means the doctor officially recommends or authorizes medicine for you.
So if I hear prescribe, I know the doctor is giving me medicine that I should get from a pharmacy.
Exactly. Then the doctor may continue by saying, "Take 1 tablet twice a day, after meals."
Sometimes instructions like that confuse me. Does twice a day simply mean 2 times every day?
Yes, that's exactly what it means. You might also hear once a day, 3 times a day, or before bedtime. These are common instructions on medicine labels.
Let me practice. I'll take 1 tablet twice a day after meals.
That sounds excellent. Repeating the instructions is actually a good habit because it helps confirm you've understood them correctly.
I never thought about repeating the instructions. That's a smart idea.
It really is. You can politely say, "So I should take 1 tablet twice a day after meals. Is that correct?" Doctors appreciate it when patients confirm important information.
That's a useful expression because it gives the doctor a chance to correct me if I misunderstood.
Exactly. Communication works both ways. Never feel embarrassed about asking for clarification.
Sometimes I worry that asking too many questions might annoy the doctor.
Most doctors actually prefer patients to ask questions. It shows you're paying attention and want to follow the treatment correctly.
That's encouraging. What kind of questions can I ask?
You could ask, how long should I take this medicine? That's one of the most common follow-up questions.
Or maybe, are there any side effects?
Excellent example. A side effect is an unwanted effect that some medicines may cause. Most side effects are mild, but it's always helpful to understand what to expect.
So, if the doctor says, you may feel sleepy, that's describing a possible side effect.
Exactly. Another helpful question is, should I avoid any food or drinks while taking this medicine?
That's practical, because some medicines have special instructions.
They certainly do. The doctor may answer, drink plenty of water and get plenty of rest.
I hear plenty of quite often. What does it mean?
Plenty of simply means a lot of, or more than enough. So, drink plenty of water means you should drink a good amount of water throughout the day.
That's another expression I can use in everyday English, not just at a clinic.
Absolutely. You might say, there are plenty of seats, or we have plenty of time. It's a very common phrase.
Here's another situation I've wondered about. What if I don't understand something the doctor says?
That's a very realistic situation. You can politely say, I'm sorry, could you please say that again? Or, could you explain that a little more simply?
Those sound much more natural than pretending I understood everything.
Simply? Exactly. Pretending can sometimes create problems, especially when it involves your health. It's always better to ask one extra question than to make a mistake with your medicine.
I completely agree. I remember helping a tourist once. He smiled and nodded, even though he didn't understand the directions. A few minutes later, he came back because he had gone to the wrong building.
That's a perfect example. Smiling is friendly, but clear communication is even more important. Whether you're asking for directions or speaking with a doctor, it's perfectly acceptable to ask someone to repeat or explain something.
I already feel much more prepared for a doctor's appointment. Instead of worrying about every word, I know I can ask questions politely and make sure I understand the advice.
That's wonderful progress. As we continue our conversation, we'll explore what happens after you leave the doctor's office, including visiting the pharmacy, talking to the pharmacist, and using natural English to understand medicine labels and treatment instructions with confidence.
I never realized that visiting the pharmacy also requires useful English. I used to think the conversation ended once I left the doctor's office.
Many people think that, but there's often another important conversation. After receiving your prescription, you'll usually visit a pharmacy. The pharmacist is there to help you understand how to use your medicines safely.
That's good to know. So when I walk up to the counter, what should I say?
A simple and natural sentence works perfectly. You can say, "Hello, I'd like to pick up my prescription, please."
I notice we're using "I'd like to" again. It's becoming one of my favorite expressions.
That's because it's useful almost everywhere. Whether you're at a clinic, a pharmacy, a restaurant, or even a hotel, it sounds friendly and polite.
Suppose the pharmacist asks, "Can I have your name and date of birth?" I understand my name, of course, but why do they ask for my date of birth?
It's a safety check. They want to make sure they're giving the medicine to the right person. You simply tell them your full name and your birth date.
That makes perfect sense. Safety is very important when it comes to medicine.
Exactly. After finding your prescription, the pharmacist may say, Your medicine will be ready in about 10 minutes.
If I don't have time to wait, can I ask another question?
Of course, you could politely ask, is it possible to come back later today? That's a very natural question.
I like how many of these expressions can be used in different situations.
That's one reason they're worth practicing. Instead of memorizing hundreds of sentences, learn flexible expressions that work almost anywhere.
Then the pharmacist hands me the medicine. What usually happens next?
They often explain how to take it. You might hear something like, please finish the entire course of antibiotics, even if you start feeling better.
I've heard that advice before. What does finish the entire course mean?
It means you should take all of the medicine exactly as prescribed until it's finished. Even if you feel healthy after a few days, stopping too early may prevent the treatment from working properly.
That's very helpful because many people stop taking medicine once they feel better.
That's true, and doctors often remind patients not to do that with certain medicines, like antibiotics.
What if I'm unsure about the instructions after I get home?
Then don't guess. You can call the pharmacy or your doctor and politely say, I have a question about my medication. Could you help me understand the instructions?
That sounds much better than making a mistake.
Absolutely. Never be afraid to ask questions about your health. Healthcare professionals expect questions, and they're usually happy to help.
Sometimes medicine labels contain words I don't understand. Should I try to translate every single word?
Not necessarily. Focus on the important information first, such as how much to take, when to take it, and whether there are any warnings. If something is unclear, ask a pharmacist to explain it in simple language.
That's practical advice. I don't have to understand every word immediately.
Exactly. Communication isn't about knowing every word in the dictionary. It's about understanding the information you need.
You know, today's conversation has changed the way I think about medical English. I expected long, difficult conversations, but most of the examples are short, clear, and realistic.
That's because real life usually works that way. Most medical conversations are built from simple questions and straightforward answers. Once you know the common patterns, they become much less intimidating.
I also noticed that confidence grows with practice. At the beginning, I wasn't sure what to say at the reception desk. Now, I feel like I could manage the entire visit, from checking in to picking up my medicine.
That's wonderful progress. Every time you practice speaking these expressions aloud, they'll become more natural. The next time you visit a clinic or pharmacy, you'll probably recognize many of these questions immediately, and your answers will come much more easily.
I think I'll practice these conversations with a friend. Taking turns asking and answering questions sounds like a fun way to remember everything.
That's an excellent idea. Speaking practice is one of the fastest ways to build confidence. Even 10 minutes of conversation practice can make a big difference. In our final conversation, we'll naturally review everything we've learned by following one complete doctor's visit from beginning to end, helping you feel ready for a real-life situation with confidence.
It's amazing how much we've covered today. At the beginning of our conversation, I wasn't sure I could even start a discussion at a doctor's clinic. Now, I feel like I can handle the entire visit with much more confidence.
That's wonderful to hear, Harry. Confidence doesn't appear overnight. It grows every time you practice. Let's imagine one complete visit together and see how naturally everything fits.
Great idea. I walk into the clinic and smile at the receptionist. I say, "Good morning. I'd like to see a doctor, please."
Very natural. The receptionist replies, "Do you have an appointment?" Then you answer,
"Yes, I have an appointment at 10 o'clock.
"Perfect." The receptionist smiles and says, "Please have a seat. The doctor will see you shortly."
A few minutes later, the doctor calls my name and says, "Please come in. What brings you in today?"
And how would you answer now?
I'd say, "I've had a sore throat for 3 days, and it's been getting worse. I've also been coughing since yesterday."
Excellent. That's clear, organized, and easy for the doctor to understand.
Then the doctor might ask, "Have you taken any medicine?"
Exactly.
I could answer, "Yes, I took some pain medicine this morning, but it didn't help very much."
That sounds completely natural.
Next, the doctor asks, "Are you allergic to any medication?"
And your reply?
"No, I'm not allergic to any medication."
Excellent. Then the doctor examines you and says, "I don't think it's anything serious. I'm going to prescribe some medication."
At that point, I shouldn't be afraid to ask questions.
Exactly. You might politely ask, "How long should I take this medicine?" Or, "Are there any side effects I should know about?"
Then the doctor explains, "Take 1 tablet twice a day after meals and drink plenty of water."
Very good. What would you do if you weren't completely sure you understood?
I'd politely say, "Just to make sure I understand, I should take 1 tablet twice a day after meals. Is that correct?"
Perfect. That's a very responsible way to communicate.
After that, I visit the pharmacy and say, "Hello, I'd like to pick up my prescription, please."
Exactly. The pharmacist explains how to use the medicine, and if anything is unclear, you can ask, "Could you explain that one more time, please?"
I really like that expression because it's polite and useful in many situations, not just at a pharmacy.
You're right. In fact, many of today's expressions can be used almost anywhere. That's one reason they're so valuable.
Looking back, I noticed that we didn't learn hundreds of difficult words. Instead, we practiced practical English that people actually use every day.
That's always our goal. Real communication doesn't depend on difficult vocabulary. It depends on speaking clearly, listening carefully, and asking questions when you need help.
I also learned that it's perfectly okay to ask someone to repeat or explain something. Before today, I thought that would make my English look weak.
Actually, it shows confidence. Good communicators ask questions because they want to understand correctly. Native speakers do the same thing every day.
That's encouraging. I think many English learners worry too much about making mistakes.
Everyone makes mistakes while learning a language. The important thing is to keep communicating. Every conversation helps you improve a little more than the last one.
If someone listening to us has never spoken English at a doctor's clinic before, I hope they realize they don't need perfect English. They just need simple, honest communication.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Start with short sentences. Speak slowly if you need to. Listen carefully, and don't hesitate to ask polite questions. Those simple habits will make every medical conversation much easier.
I'm definitely going to practice today's expressions out loud. I think hearing my own voice will help me remember them much better.
That's an excellent plan. Even a few minutes of speaking practice each day can make a noticeable difference. The next time you visit a doctor, you'll recognize familiar questions, and your answers will come much more naturally.
This has been one of my favorite conversations because it's something people can use in real life. Hopefully, everyone listening feels more confident than they did at the beginning of the episode.
We certainly hope so. Thank you for spending this time with us today. Keep practicing a little every day. Stay curious, and remember that every conversation is another step towards speaking English with confidence.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We hope to join you again soon with another practical English conversation. Until next time, take care of yourself, keep learning, and have a wonderful day.